hope that I hope that you all were able to hear something that just applied to you, that God was able to speak to you and show you some things. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 37, and we're going to be hopefully getting through a pretty good section in this chapter. See here, does this go?
You mean tonight?
Do what?
You mean tonight?
Yeah, I mean, you know what's interesting is that this message, the message I preached this morning, I planned on finishing the chapter. And then I looked at the watch, and it was like, we still got 8 more verses. We're going to have a song of invitation. So that's why we did that this morning. And it worked out good, because next week I think we're really going to focus on just, you know, when the Bible describes how Lazarus come out of the tomb, it says he was bound. Well, does not Paul say that we're bound in our sin as dead men? And he says, loose him. Well, is that not what God does when he gives us life? He frees us from that bondage, and we are given life. And there's just so many things in there that I thought, you know what, we're just going to make a whole message on the life. I mean, what is so great about this resurrection that Jesus does in front of these people? And so that's what we're going to be looking at next week. So we'll just make a whole message out of that. And so that's going to be good. That's going to be exciting. But tonight we're going to be working our way through 37. And remember, we have finished up really the life of Jacob, whose name now is Israel. And we're going into a young man whose name is Joseph. This is Jacob's son, his firstborn son from his wife, Rachel. And so we're going to study this. And you know, as I was looking over my notes and stuff this afternoon, I thought, you know, what greater time, because we're going to be looking at a man that God used, that we've got chapters and chapters on the life of this man. And it just seems like every time things just started where he got his feet underneath of him and things started looking like we're going to make it through this, his feet got taken out from under him again. And you know, and it's like, whoa, God, what is going on? And not one time do we ever see him complain. And we just see this character that God is forming into this man to be used for him, that will eventually, you know, affect the entire nation of Israel. And not only that, but things are going to be known worldwide through the character of this young man. And so that's why I just think this story of Joseph is so great. And when you think about the turmoil that even our nation is going through right now, there's so many people just wringing their hands. Now, I can tell you, grounded Christians, while we can be frustrated and we can say, God, we're not liking this, I don't know very many Christians that are just, that are grounded Christians that are just wringing their hands. We know God is moving, and God is dealing, and God is speaking, and God is moving, and he is letting us know, I'm coming soon. And we know that. And but there are a lot of people out there that just wringing their hands. I can tell you, is that on? Okay. All right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So anyway, let's go ahead and let's just open up with prayer, and then we'll pick up where we left off and see what God has for us. Dear Lord Jesus, I just thank you once again for allowing us another opportunity where we can just gather together and just worship you in song and in word. God, I thank you for my brothers and sisters that are here tonight. God, I thank you for this building that you have given us. I thank you for those faithful men and women who were willing to give and pay this building off so that this church can operate debt-free. Thank you, God. And what a blessing that has been God, I just ask that you continue to use this church. You've used this church for many years. You've used some of the people, the members in this church, for many, many years right here in this community. And God, I ask that you continue to use us. God, I thank you for bringing Maya and I to this church where we can be part of the ministry that you have in this area. God, I just ask that you just clear my mind of any distractions. God, give me the words that you would have for us to hear tonight as we study this young man named Joseph and how he had decided I was going to be a man of integrity. And God, what an inspiration that is for us when we see others that were faithful for you and to you, and it helps us to know that we also can make those same choices and we can follow in those very same footsteps because just as you were with Joseph, you're going to be with us. God, I thank you once again for allowing us to be here tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So, starting out, remember, I'm just going to give a real quick review. You know, nobody is perfect. And every once in a while, when we read through Scripture, we come to these people that we see that there's really no example of a time when there was sin in their life. Very, very few. We actually, a few Wednesdays ago, when we saw the video, the man that was speaking, he shared with us that so oftentimes what we like to do is we like to read the Bible and we see the characters or the people that are in the Bible, and we say, oh, but those were Bible people, as if they're different from us, as if they were on a higher pedestal or they had more knowledge than us, or as if they, that life was just so different for them. They weren't met with the challenges and the feelings and emotions and things like we deal with today, and how wrong that is. Matter of fact, we have a whole lot more information than they did because we have the entire book. We know how everything started and we know how it's going to end. We have the whole picture. We're given the whole plan. And so how silly it is for us to look at people in the Bible and say, I could never do that. Well, and so God just picked out these people that he wanted to put in his word for you and I to study, so that as we study them, many of us, some of you might relate more to Moses. Some of you might be able to relate to Jonah or to Joseph or to Adam or to, some of you wish you were Enoch, right? But hey, we all relate to different people in the Bible, and he put them in there for us to study and learn from. And it's what a great thing. Joseph, what I titled the message, the first when we started chapter 37, is Let the Integrity Begin. And the reason I titled it that way is because Joseph chose to be a man of integrity from the very young age that we see him starting out in. And what is integrity? Remember, it's the quality of being honest. It's having strong moral principles. That's something we don't find a whole lot of today. We all know that. But that's what was going on. And what is interesting is that Joseph was only 17 years old when we start reading his life. And we know even at that young age, he had already decided, I am going to be a man of integrity. There was something that was different about him. And so one of the questions that we studied, or that I asked us whenever we first started this chapter is, am I known as a man of integrity? That's something that we should ask ourselves. Am I an honest person, even when my peers aren't around? Okay, do my principles make me blend in or stand in contrast to the world? Those are things that we need to be thinking about. And examples of that would be my language, music I listen to, what I drink, what are the values in my life? Does that make me look more like Jesus or less like Jesus? And that's what we talked about a little bit as we started. One of the things that we find so interesting about Joseph is that his family was in stark contrast to him. All of his brothers, they were deceitful, they were liars, they were men who responded off of emotion. They were men of the world. And we know that, and we see examples. The oldest son, Reuben, took off with one of dad's wives for a while. You know, we see that. We see Judah, who's going to make some decisions, and we're going to read about that in the next chapter. The consequences that come later on in life because of some decisions he's going to make here that were against his own brother Joseph. Joseph stood in direct contrast of his family, even his father. And we saw last time that we were together studying this, Joseph had a dream. And the Bible said that as he revealed his dream to those brothers and his family, it says his brothers hated him even more. They just detested him. They didn't like it. Now, I don't think that Joseph was bragging about these dreams in any way. He may have been a little naive. But this is what I found. Integrity in that kind of an environment is like integrity in today's world. It's either going to be welcomed or despised. And is that not exactly what we see today? When I fill out applications for jobs, and they ask me all these questions, have you stolen money? Would you take money? Would you report a manager if you saw them doing something wrong? You have to do all these things online now. And you know what I found is that when I filled out these little surveys on all these, every single one of these large companies, when I filled out the answers that I know to be how I would know, I've never stolen anything from a company. I've never taken any money out of a register before. I would report someone if I saw them steal something from the, you know what? Every one of those companies sent me an email back and said, we just don't think you're the kind of guy we need in our company. Every one of them.
I got one of those from Lowe's.
But yeah, I was going to say, Lowe's, yeah, they were one of the companies I filled out an application with. And they said, we don't know that we really need your kind of person here. Isn't that interesting? But yet, here's what happened. When I found a company that was run by a Christian man, all I told him is that, I'm a pastor of a church and I'm looking for just a part-time job so that I'm still going to be able to have time to study and be off on Wednesday nights for services and be prepared for Wednesday night services, but then also Sunday morning, Sunday night, and things like that. He said, let's have lunch. I sat down with him and over lunch, just talking about things I've done in ministry. We didn't even talk about any of my work history. Talked about things I've done in working with vacation Bible schools and working in church camps and youth camps and preaching in different churches and things like that. He said, you know what, why don't you just go ahead and start on such and such a day and you're hired. And that's exactly where we're at. Integrity in an environment is either going to be welcomed or despised. Those with godly morals will embrace people with integrity. But those without godly morals are going to despise honesty and integrity. And the reason that they're going to despise it is because it shows their own sin. That's what happens. Adrian Rogers, I've got a sermon of his, but he said, Adrian Rogers says, envy is the root of all bitterness. And see, there was one thing that those brothers saw in Joseph. He was a man of integrity. And when they stood in the midst of their brother, even though he was a younger brother, when they saw that he didn't give into the temptations that they gave into growing up, he didn't do the things that they were doing that they shouldn't have been doing as they were raising the flock, and the way they treated the animals and the flocks, and the way they worked with this, to probably talk with the slaves, and the way they I could see them kind of being more like spoiled brats in the company. But Joseph didn't have that. He said, no, I'm gonna be a hard worker. I'm gonna be a man of integrity. I'm gonna be honest. And that's why his father chose to use him as a messenger. I want you to go out and find your brothers. I want you to give me a report of what they're doing and what's going on with the flocks. And the brothers despised Joseph for that, because Joseph hadn't failed where they had. And that's kind of where we left off last time. And so we're going to be picking up in verse 12 of chapter 37. And so if you would, chapter 37, verse 12, it says, then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Now remember, we talked about Shechem Interesting that the brothers have taken the flocks back to Shechem because that's where they had fled from sometime earlier, because that's where the two brothers had gone in and completely wiped out all the men, killed them all. And then remember, it said they took the women and the children as captives. And they're using that land now to feed their flocks. I don't think there's any real significance to that, other than the fact that it's kind of interesting that they're using that land now to graze their animals. Now, they're 50 miles. Shechem is 50 miles from where they're at, because we know that they are in the Hebron Valley. And we find that out whenever Jacob sends Joseph out. And that would be a 2 days journey from Shechem. So no wonder Jacob says, Joseph, I want you to head out and find your brothers and give me a report on what's going on. Because the brothers are over a 2 days journey away. And so there's no telling how long they've been gone. But he says, I want you to go check on the flocks, give me a report on what's going on, and come on back. And so that's kind of the background where we're at. It says, verse 13, and Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Verse 14, then he said to him, please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. So Joseph is on his way. He's going to check on the flock, and it's not a tattletale kind of thing. I think of Joseph as kind of like a supervisor, right? Who's the top dog out here on the work site? That's kind of what, like a manager would do, right? He's the one wearing the hard hat, but he's wearing the nice button-up vest. Okay, he's not walking in the mud and the muck and got the tool belt around his waist, okay? And so he's going out to check on what is the status of the brothers, and then also what's going on with the flocks. That's where he's going, and he would be going out there to come back to give a report. Now, this is not the first time that's happened. And so the brothers, as soon as they see him, they know exactly what's going on. So look in verse 15, it says, now a certain man found him there, and there he was, wandering in the field. And a man asked him, saying, what are you seeking? Verse 16. So he said, I am seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Okay, so Joseph gets to the area. They're not where they would be normally grazing. I don't think there's anything wrong with them going, but here's what you need to understand. Dothan is another 10 miles farther north. So now they're 60 miles from home. They have moved their flocks 10 miles away. Okay, and that's where they're at. Verse 18, it says, now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. I'm just going to stop right here. The brothers see him far off, and they have so much envy, they can only see Joseph through hate-filled eyes. Now, we have to be very careful, because we can look at these brothers and say, boy, what a mess they were. But how easy it is for you and I to fall into that very same situation, that very same sin. In Jeremiah 17:9, it says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Meaning there is no limit to the wickedness in my heart or your heart if you take your eyes off the Lord. There is no limit. And when you see others and you say, that wicked person over there, understand you are equally able to do that and more if you take your eyes off the Lord. And, taking our focus off of Jesus, we're capable of doing those very same things. Let me give you an example of that. Because we think, well, how could someone be like that? Have you ever, surely not in this church, seen someone come in the door, maybe even another church member, and you look over at them and you go, I know I gotta love them, but I hope they don't come and say anything to me, because I can't stand to be around that person. That's the very same attitude those brothers had when they saw Joseph. And you say, nah, no one would be that way. Oh, it happens. It happens in our church. It happens in every church. It's easy. Someone somehow makes you upset over something, and if you don't get right with God very early on and say, God, forgive me for this feeling that I'm having of anger, and you don't get right with that brother or sister, you can really start to build up bitterness and anger within. And it festers and it grows and it grows, and it can make you a very, very mean person. And it can happen. We have to be careful of that. You know, growing up and living here in America, we don't really see much of that kind of wickedness and hate. But I'm going to tell you, because many of our morals and our values, our laws and our beliefs, they come straight from the Bible. They do. But if you were to grow up in a country like I grew up in New Guinea, where there is no Bible, and where people had never heard the name of Jesus, and they'd never experienced the love of Jesus, let me tell you, there's a lot of wickedness and a lot of very hateful and shallow people there. And they can be very, very cruel. I noticed while we were there, they were very cruel even to animals, to nature. These people had no regard for anyone. To kill someone would be no big deal to them. While we were there, there were younger people in our village that killed, a woman, and it was talked about around a campfire as if they had just killed a wild pig. I mean, it was no big deal. There was no remorse. There was no sign of that. And you say, can that really happen? It can when you've not experienced the love of God. It can. And growing up in New Guinea, I saw that. The people over there are full of that. Full of that kind of hate and anger and deceit. Full of Satan. Now, we do have very sick people here in America. People who do hate our laws, we know that, and they hate our land. And we know that there are people here who are against our government and against our God. We know that. And they've been working hard to take those things away. But understand that those people have always existed in this country. It's just now they're growing in number enough that they have a voice. But it is only going to take God's people putting the Great Commission first and foremost in their lives to change those people. And one thing that we find with Joseph, dealing with his brothers, is we're going to see even at the end of the story. He won them and changed their hearts and their lives by sharing with them the love of God. It was the love of God that he was able to share with them. And that is the way that America will become the nation that we need to be. That's the only way, is by the Christians continuing to share the love of God with those who hate and envy and are bitter towards us. And we win them to the Lord. Look in verse 19, it says, Then they said to one another, Look, this dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, Some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. Just as I shared, that's how people were in New Guinea. I mean, they would just, the cruelty and of no regard. And you see there's no regard here. Look at what it says in verse 21. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him. And then I have a little dash mark here, and it says, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. So the brothers are gathered around, and they see Joseph coming across the field, and they say, I can't stand that guy. Let's get rid of him once and for all. Here comes the dreamer. We take him out, we won't have to hear about the dreams anymore. Let's just kill him. Let's do it. Let's just kill him. Now, Reuben, firstborn, says, No, let's not shed any blood. Let's not kill him. Let's throw him in this pit. And then it says, What was his plan? That he would come back and take Joseph out and take him back to the father, back to Jacob. Now, why do you think Reuben wanted to take him out? Do you think it was because he really loved Joseph and wanted to take care of him? I think what he's realized is, you know what? I was fooling around with Dad's wife. I have lost all my rights as the firstborn son. I have no recognition as firstborn. There is nothing that's coming to me. Saving my little brother, the one who Dad loves the most, that's going to give me some points. And this very well could be what is going to get me back in speaking terms maybe with my dad. I don't think it was because he really loved Joseph. I think he was thinking of his own self, and we're even going to see this because by his reaction of what he says when he finds out Joseph's gone. So, how are we doing on time? We're not too bad, Junior.
No, we're doing good.
All right, yeah. Yeah, one thing I like about this church is that, I don't have to worry about time because several of you just do this thing or,
Put up the
yeah, yeah. I've noticed, and it looks like someone even shined the front of that thing to make sure I can see the hands clearly
right.
on there, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, flashing lights. Now, I will tell you, Maya and I were in another church, but they actually did 2 services on Sunday morning, and they actually had a stop clock, or whatever, time on the back. And it would run down so that he would know, okay, I got to wrap it up because we got the next service starting in 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. And so they did do that. But, yeah. Anyway, so look at verse 25. I got to follow my notes here. Or 24, it says, so it came to pass. Oh, wait. I'm skipping a bunch of stuff, aren't I? Yeah. I need to. Yeah. Let's start at 21. Let's go back 21. He said, let's not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. Verse 23. So it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So basically, it was an empty well. That's what they did. Now, I just imagine as Joseph, I can see him walking up to his brothers, completely oblivious to what's about to happen. Hey guys, I'm here. I made it. My goodness, I didn't know you guys traveled another 10 miles. I had to stop and ask, Jose down there in the field, where y'all were. And I can see him just talking. And they come up and they grab him, and I can see them, kind of roughing him up a little bit. And I can see at first him kind of thinking they're just trying to scare me. They're just scaring me. If you've ever been with a group of, if you've got a lot of brothers, or you've been in a group like that. I mean, when I was in the Corps, that was kind of a goal that we wanted to do. Was there was a group of us that we just like to scare each other, and so we do everything we could. Just to humiliate and scare one another the worst way possible. And so I can see at first Joseph, okay, you got me, guys. But the tone of the brothers doesn't drop. It increases. And they rip that coat off of him. And they probably pinned him on the ground. And he's saying, okay, guys, I give. And they're not letting up. And they grab him and they throw him down into a pit that is a well that is dried up. That's the setting that's going on. But then look in verse 25, and this reminds me so much of the people in New Guinea. And they sat down to eat a meal. Let's just pause right there. No regard for the life. No regard. Growing up in New Guinea, I saw kids that were born maybe with a deformity. That we had a young child that was born in our village while we were there that was blind. They just threw the child out in the jungle. Just threw it and let it die. Because, oh, well, never going to be of any good. That's the kind of regard they had for life. And once again, I just share that with you because without the love of Christ, that's exactly what Satan wants to do with your life and mine. Is show you that there is no life. There is no point. There's no hope. There's no future. And it doesn't matter. You're worth no more than the raccoon or the possum that got hit on the road on the way to church. That's what Satan wants you to believe. That's why suicide rates are up. That's why we have all of these problems going on around the world, because Satan has infiltrated the hearts of so many people and told them they are worthless. And these brothers have no regard for their younger brother. They throw him in a pit. I can just imagine him in the bottom of that pit. Okay, guys, let me out. Guys, it's not funny anymore. Guys, get me out of here. I've been down here a little while. And what is it they're doing? They're sitting on the rocks and they're eating their meal. Now, for most of us, something tragic like that happens. Your stomach's in a knot and you can't eat. These boys, they sit down as if, finally, we got rid of it. And now we can eat. And that's what's going on here. Look in verse 25, the second part of that says, Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing spices, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, here we see Judah enter into the picture, the mess that he is. So Judah said to his brothers, What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listen. Verse 28. Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. So Judah has a bright plan. He's looking off on the horizon, probably coming across the hill is this caravan of Ishmaelites. Now, this won't be the first time that we've heard about Ishmaelites. We know exactly who they come from. You know who they are? They're cousins. This is family from across the way. And they're headed down to Egypt. It says, we don't want to have any guilt. We don't want his blood on our hands. That's what Judah says. Look, guys, we don't want his blood on our hands. So here's what we do. We won't kill him. Let's just sell him. Let's at least get a little profit out of this. Now, you have to remember who are the Ishmaelites. 150 years from this very time, 150 years earlier, is when Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away. It's been 150 years. Do you know what's interesting? As I got to this part in the story, I wanted to kind of refresh my mind, and so I went back and I studied Ishmael and what all happened with him. Did you know Ishmael had 12 sons also? 12 sons. Over 150 years. Do you think they could have multiplied? You bet they could have in 150 years, having 12 sons. And that's not counting how many daughters he had. But then also, it doesn't just say they were Ishmaelites, but what does it say also? Midianites. Do you remember where did the Midianites come from?
The other side of the desert.
Remember when Sarah, Abraham's wife, died? He got married to who? Keturah.
Oh.
And remember, he had 5 or 6 sons, and one of them was named Midian. So what we know is these brothers, because they were not part of God's plan, these brothers stayed in that land where they moved into that area where the Ishmaelites, where Uncle Ishmael was. And they have intermingled in to these nomadic tribes. And so the word Ishmaelites really had become more of it was just a common term for these traders. And so they said, oh, look, here come the Ishmaelites. But then as they got closer, they were able to see the actual family line of who these Ishmaelites were. They were, in fact, the Midianites from Midian. Isn't that interesting? I went back and studied through some of my history books and looked all this stuff up, and it's pretty interesting. But that's why it mentions that they were Ishmaelites, and then it gets real direct, and it says they were actually, in fact, Midianites of the Ishmaelite group. So, anyway, I don't know if that you cared to even know any of that, but I thought that was pretty interesting because it says that they wanted to go ahead and sell him, get a little price, and we'll divvy it up. Now, the amount that they sold him for was next to nothing. I mean, I don't know what you could have bought if they split it up between the 10 of them, you know. But anyway, they got a little money. Look at what happens, verse 29. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. And he returned to his brother, and he said, now remember, tearing of clothes was like a sign of complete just sorrow, right? I mean, it was, you would cover your face in ash. If someone was to die, a close family member or loved one, you would cover your face in ash and you would tear your clothes. And that was a sign of, I am completely, I can't get any lower than where I'm at right now. So it says he tore his clothes, and it says, and he returned to his brothers and said, the lad is no more. Where shall, what? I go. What's going to happen to me? Yeah, see, because, yeah, right. Because even though he probably lost, well, we know he lost his inheritance, and we know what comes because we know the end of the story. But we know there was a break in there, and Joseph is wearing the coat that would say, hey, I'm number one. That's what that coat signified. He's the one that's got the honor and the recognition. And now Reuben looks down, and his brother is not in that pit. Probably he went to check on the livestock. And he comes back, and his brother is gone. And he tears his clothes, and he says, what's going to happen to me now? What is going to happen to me? Every chance I had of reconciling with my father is completely lost, is what he says. Look at verse 31, it says, so they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, we have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not? Now, how? Were you going to say something, Dan?
I was going to say, you said he didn't have his tunic when he was in the pit.
Huh?
They stripped him of his tunic when they threw him in the pit.
Yeah, they had.
Right, but they had it.
Yeah.
The brothers still had it.
Well, I thought you said Reuben looked in the pit and he wasn't there, and his tunic was gone.
Oh, no, just that he was gone.
Okay.
Yeah. It says, so they said, hey, Dad, we found this. Right, this tunic is all mangled up, ripped up, and they dipped it in this goat's blood. Hey, Dad, we found this. Is this Joseph's? How ignorant. Anyway, is this your son's tunic? Notice they didn't say, is this our brother's? Is this your son's? You know, we find that, remember when God went and spoke to Cain, and he said, where's Abel? And he said, I'm not his keeper. Later on, we see God speaking, and the guy says, well, you know what? That's your son. You know, with Abraham, and then we see later on that they're pointing the fingers, but there's no, this is me. We even see that all the way when we read the prodigal. Remember the story of the prodigal? And we have the son that stayed. And he never identifies with the other as his brother. This is your son. Your son. So they come and they say, is this your son's coat?
I heard it when I was growing up.
What happened to Reuben?
My mother told my dad, come look what your son did.
Yeah.
Yeah? Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was something I never wanted to hear.
I want to hear my middle name.
Yeah, usually, yeah, it was, Norm, you need to go on upstairs, your son's waiting for you. Yeah, I heard that one.
He's not my son, he's your son.
Yeah.
My son wouldn't do that.
So it says in verse 33, and he recognized it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces." Verse 34, then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. It says, and all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him. See? This is one of the first places we see that he had several daughters also, but they're never named. But he had a lot of daughters in there. It says, they came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And just to finish it up, it says, now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Now, something interesting I found is that Potiphar is a title. Okay, and so where it says he's captain of the guard, Potiphar really would have been the executioner. He's captain of the guard. He would have been the one that would have been over the executions. Isn't that interesting? That he would have been, I'm captain of the guard. And so when the prisoners would come in, they would be all in there. And what he was the overseer of is who was going to be dying that day. That was what his position was under Pharaoh. And so he would be the one that would tell his other guard, hey, you go out there and get, cell block 9, get him out. Today's his day. That was what Potiphar did. And that's who Joseph served and worked under. Very interesting. So let me see what my notes here had. What is it that we take from this passage as we remember? This is just kind of an introduction as we're getting into really this whole first chapter of 37 is really just who is Joseph? What's going on here? Because now we're really going to start seeing the integrity of him and his faithfulness to the Lord in obedience. That's what we're going to be seeing and looking at over the next few weeks. But what do we take from this? God took Jacob. We see that God took Jacob through some real trials and storms. We saw the deceiver be deceived. And we saw that God was taking him through some of those because he was forming and molding Jacob into the man he needed to be. And then we see Joseph, who is not a man, a deceiver. He's a man of integrity. And yet God begins to take Joseph through a storm at a very young age. And so how wrong it would be for us to think that, hey, just because I'm doing everything right, I'm living for the Lord, I'm trusting the Lord, how wrong it is, what a lie that message is for anyone to say, oh, if you're doing what you need to be doing in the Lord, everything's going to be baseball and apple pie. Everything's going to be, cream and soda for you. Things are just going to be, cherries. No. God works. And remember, we talked about this before. God creates storms in our lives. Sometimes it's to bring us back because we've strayed away. That's what I think is going on here in America. God is allowing some major storms to come in to our nation. And what it's doing is it's putting a lot of people in check. What is it I really believe in? Where's my faith really at? And we see that. Some people are placing all their faith in what they're hearing in the news media and everywhere around. And then there's others that are saying, God, I am seeking you. God, you tell me what is going on. What is it I need to be doing, God? But it's really giving everyone a self-check. Where is my faith placed? Sometimes God takes us through storms to bring us back to him. But then there's also times that God brings us through storms, takes us through storms to strengthen us and to form us into the man or the woman he's wanting us to be to carry out the plan that he has for us. And what he's doing is he is strengthening Joseph and making him into the man that he's going to need to be to rule under Pharaoh in a pagan nation and yet be an example for God that will touch the entire world and the entire known world at that time. That's what God is doing. Joseph's faith is being stretched, and God will stretch your faith and mine. Don't think that you're not going to be going through any storms. So what is it that we can take from this chapter? We need to be men and women of integrity. If you're a child of God, you need to be a man. Choose. Say, I am going to be a man or a woman of integrity. We need to be available and ready to be used by God. And being available means that we are His no matter the circumstance. You know what I find in all of the things that we see that happens to Joseph, we don't ever read where he complains. Now, I bet you there were some tears while he was down in that pit. And I bet you there were some real tears when he was tied up and then chained to the back of that camel, and probably with other slaves. And he was drug off. I bet you there was some why. What did I do? Please don't sell me. Come get me, please. I bet you that, but we don't read anywhere where he was, all right, you know what? I'll be back. You wait. You wait. You're going to get yours, buddy. We don't read any of that anywhere.
You already did that in the dream.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right. He already let them know what was coming in the dream. But just remember that God is continually going to be working in your life and mine. And He's going to be taking you and I. We're going to be going through some storms. Sometimes it's to bring us back to where our focus is back on Him. And other times it's simply just to strengthen your faith and prepare you for what's coming next. Because just as I was shared this morning, sometimes I went through some really tough storms. And the reason I went through those storms was because after I went through that storm, I was able to handle some of the other things that God had to prepare me for. And had I not gone through some of those storms before, had I not gone through the storm where it was like, you know what? I think I really need to kind of get back into reading God's Word. Had I not gone through some storms and decided, you know what? I think I need to start being a little more faithful in praying. You know, I think I need to be a little more faithful in living for God and taking my relationship with God seriously. If I hadn't gotten there, do you think I would have been able to answer the call when God said, I want you to preach? See, God had to take me through some storms, and He had to mold me and get me fitted for the next thing He had for me. And it's going to be the same for you. And it's going to continue until the day He takes us home. Remember Psalm 50. You know, I know that I've mentioned this 2 or 3 weeks in a row and 2 or 3 different sermons in a row. And I think part of it is just because I read this and it just really resonated with me. Call out and I will be there. I will protect you and I will get you through the trials so that I will get the praise and glory.
Amen. Exactly right.
Remember that. Remember that. God is going to take you through storms so that you will call out to Him. And that's part of the reason why I think the way I do about what's going on in America. God is allowing some things to happen in our nation because God is wanting His people, many of these professing Christians that are children of God, but they're living out in the world. I think God is saying, you know what? I'm going to allow some trials to come so that you will call out to me. Because you haven't talked to me in a while. And I think that's what's happening. So, do we have any questions?
Hey, Matt,